Hello and welcome. Just taking a moment to get comfortable, and you also. After mentioning the snake and the dog incident, after talking to you last time, the dog was howling again, so I went to check, and the snake had returned. So rather than letting the dog off its chain, because the owners weren't around, I just sat with the dog to see what happened, and the snake, I think sensing the presence of a human, just went away. So that was successful. But I'll have to keep an eye on that situation, because no doubt it will return. Now, the first comment here is actually has jumped the queue a little. Not that there's a queue, but I try to talk about them in some kind of the order in which I receive them, in order that you can hopefully remember sending the question or making the comment and relate it to that. The person writing, it's quite a straightforward question, quite a straightforward answer, but it got me thinking about something else, so that's why I've brought it to the forefront. I'm currently experiencing a persistent dry cough that is seriously affecting my ability to sit still during meditation. Any advice on how to manage this situation? If I take a brief break from my practice, will this set me back? Okay, the bit that got me thinking was the last part, the second question. If I take a brief break from my practice, will this set me back? And that's mainly what I wanted to address, because why do we want to take a break from our practice? What is our practice? Well, our practice is holistic. It is everything. We are seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, doing. All of our actions of body, speech and mind, they are our practice. All of our ailments are inclusive of that holistic practice. Everything is covered by the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, intention, speech, actions, livelihood, effort, mindfulness and meditation. This is our practice, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. There are no breaks. One could have maybe got off to a full start, thought one was practicing that, but wasn't, and felt you had to stop. But if you are practicing that and just that, with the understanding of right view and having the right intentions, then you'll see actually there is no requirement for a break. It's like going on holiday and then halfway through the holiday saying, I actually need a holiday from this. Okay, that does happen, but logically speaking, that doesn't make sense. You're having a holiday, a break, you don't need a break from that. Meditation is the break. It is the best break we ever get in life, because it is the opportunity to break from, ultimately, samsara. That is rebirth. Rebirth into subsequent lifetimes in varying realms. If you don't even want to accept that because your practice isn't such that you can see the essential requirement of that understanding, then it is okay, because you know also experientially that everything you are doing currently in the present moment will determine how things happen next. What's next? The groundwork you're putting in place now with moral virtue, sila, by behaving well, by being kind, practicing generosity, is what will determine what happens to you next, even if it's in just so much as how you feel. So, taking into account and looking at this question, with our ailments, we can have perhaps some problem with our back or our knees. And actually, what you bring to my attention here with regards to a cough, that can be one of the most difficult ones to overcome, because not only are you disturbing yourself, especially if you're meditating with others, you may feel very inhibited because you're disturbing others. So I trust that the questioner really just means a break, not from the practice, but a break from that meditation, sitting formally in samadhi. I know very well that the person writing this question doesn't mean all of a sudden they're going to break from sila and break from developing wisdom. So forgive me if you thought I was directing it at you. I'm not at all. Just generally speaking, we must understand, all of us, that this is our break. This is the greatest thing we can experience within this lifetime. So when we have the opportunity at any time to be practicing, that is what we should want to be doing. If we don't want to be doing it, if we don't have the enthusiasm for it, then we don't have to. That's one option. Or we could make inquiries of ourselves as to why that is. And it will be because we're not enjoying it. And if we're not enjoying it, it's because we're not seeing the benefits of it. We're not getting the fruit of our practice. We're not seeing the benefits, the results of what we are working at. So, with regards to the specifics of this, a dry cough, well, firstly, I would suggest environmentally, you need to just check what's going on around you. I was having this bit of a cough doing the morning chanting, and it was just something as simple as we light incense in the morning puja, and they were right just in front of me where I was chanting, just behind me here. So just making the slight difference of putting the incense outside or in a different part of the room meant that I didn't have this persistent dry cough anymore. So if it's not something environmentally, not something in the air, then of course go and see the doctor. That's you're asking me any advice how to manage the situation. It always has to be trust the medical professionals in this situation. Even with just a slight cough, if it's enough to interrupt anything you're doing and it's persistent and continuing for a long time, maybe it's gone by now, the time I've got round to answering this question, but if it's still there, you check with your medical professionals, either with the call helplines that they have in different numbers for different countries, or you go to see your doctor, your GP. If that's not available, be very careful, but there are online resources. Don't all of a sudden go to Google and find that Dr. Google has given you some dreadful terminal disease. We all know that that's a problem sometimes, but seek medical advice first. Other than that, if you're on your own, just sit and meditate as normal. Don't worry about it. If there's nobody to be disturbed other than yourself, you of course will be interrupted in terms of attaining to samadhi, deep states of absorption in your meditation, but will pass. It's impermanent. If it lasts any longer than a few days or weeks, then of course you need to seek medical attention, like I've said. So that's what I would suggest. But we don't need to be taking breaks from our practice, but seeing our practice as the break in itself. Right, how to find a Buddhist teacher who can teach Buddhism from the basics, may it be online or offline. Please guide me. Well, there's so many choices, aren't there? But the Buddha is our teacher, and he teaches us the very simple basics of what became known or has become known as Buddhism. His name wasn't Buddha. Buddha just means enlightened one, the awakened one. And we have coined this phrase Buddhism to name and term this practice, this philosophy, this religion, which is simply teaching us the basics of existence. Now, if you watch these videos, I will repeat time and time again, as I just have, what the practice is, to realize the truth of the characteristics of this existence: anicca, impermanence; dukkha, suffering; and anatta, not self. But the Buddha taught us the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path to this end, to give us this understanding, that there is suffering, a cause of suffering, an end of suffering, and this path, the Noble Eightfold Path, leading to the end of suffering. It cannot get more basic than that, but that is all you need to get to grips with, to understand, to be able to practice. The rest you can learn, and the best teacher is what you experience yourself, using those valuable lessons from the Buddha himself, whom became enlightened with just that knowledge, with no teacher directly leading him towards enlightenment, just his experience of the practice so far, and what he realized when simply sitting, watching the breath, about the nature of existence, and then compassionately shared with us all. So that's where you find the teachings, and that is whom your teacher is. Now, on top of that, there is an infinite number of online resources, material book, library resources, going back throughout history, but anything that varies from that theme is just optional extras and not necessary. Just get to know the Four Noble Truths. Practice the Noble Eightfold Path. If you need that in writing, you need that clear definition, look at the Wikipedia explanations, entries on both those subjects, the Four Noble Truths, Buddhism, and the Noble Eightfold Path, Buddhism, and you will see very clearly in black and white what it is really the Buddha taught. If you want to then develop that, open up that understanding, a very good place to start is with the basic Theravada Buddhist chanting book, because in there, although it's chanting, it is summarized versions of the suttas and the teachings of the Buddha, as well as the reflections on those teachings about how we go about practicing in our everyday lives. It's designed and directed towards both lay people and to monastics alike, whom both have the opportunity to attain to Nibbana, which is the ultimate goal of freedom from suffering in this lifetime and no further rebirth. This is what we hope to attain to, not the heavenly realms or the godly realms or infinite lifetimes or anything like this, but to be free from rebirth. Firstly, free from suffering in this lifetime, and then free from rebirth. And as a layperson, one can do this even amidst the distractions of household life. In a way, albeit a bit more difficult because of the renunciation, the giving up of household life that is involved and all of its attractions and comforts, the monastic path, ordination, becoming a monk or a nun, is in fact the fast-tracked route to Nibbana. That is the idea. You realize through your practice that the lay life is distracting. And to avoid that distraction, you renounce it and you go forth into homelessness, literally. You give up your place where you live, your clothing, your identity, your friends, your family, your job, the use of money, and all of these things, to become not a recluse. You're still dependent on society, on lay people, but the member of a community at first, where you're trained to live the monastic life, and then ultimately, after a long time, can go out on your own, living in solitude, but still reliant on local lay practitioners to support your everyday needs like food, shelter, robes and medicine, in order to just focus on your practice of meditation and hopefully attain to freedom from suffering in this lifetime. That is the idea, and that is what the Buddha taught. So if you're looking for a teacher, there are people online teaching, Buddhist monks. I would direct your attention mainly towards monks, ordained practitioners, not because there's anything wrong with lay teachers in any respect at all, but if you're listening to monks teaching you, and I'm not also generalizing, because not always is it the case that every teacher, whether they're monks or lay people, will be suitable for you. You find someone you are comfortable to listen to, and you have to like your teacher. There's nothing wrong with liking and disliking if you know this is just a matter of liking or disliking, but you will not learn much if you have a aversion or a disliking towards the person teaching you. You'll know that from your experience at school. The teachers you liked were the ones you learned from more easily. So find a teacher you like to listen to and listen to what they have to say, and hopefully if it's coming from a place of experience and it's taught to you in a way, they're speaking in a way that you can understand easily, and there's so much choice that should be available to everybody, wherever you're from, whatever your language, and whomever the kinds of people are that you like or dislike, there's someone always for you. That is the kind of person you look towards. I can't recommend. It's like saying, what would you recommend as my favourite fruit? That is up to you to decide. You may choose an apple, I may choose a banana. Ultimately, we will gain the same nutritional value, but the nature of how we get there is slightly different. So the next question. Why am I called English Buddhist Monk? Why is the channel called? No, calling myself English, because actually that is what I am. I'm English. I'm from England, UK. I don't usually use the term British because, well, no reason. It's just English. Technically, my nationality is British, but yeah. So I just say English. I think it's more to just emphasize the nature of the only language I speak, English. It clarifies that, because it's the name of the channel, that this will be a Buddhist monk speaking in English without having to say a whole long sentence. So that's how it came about, really by accident, no planning, and that is why. So, when will you come back to India, and which temple will you stay in? So I'm not sure. I have no particular immediate plans to return. I was there for the last Vasa, and I'm from the Mahabodhi Society of Bangalore, whose main monastery branch is in Bangalore, South India, Karnataka. So usually when I go to India, I start off there, but they have many branches, something like 18, I think, or maybe even up to 20, 24 branches now throughout the whole of India, from the northeast down to the south. So many options for me to choose from, depending on where I'm directed to. I take advice from them. But I have no immediate plans to return to India soon. As a British citizen, an English Buddhist monk, it isn't an easy place to be. They make it, the immigration rules for British citizens are such we're only allowed to be in the country for a maximum of 6 months. Even if we leave the country and return, that cannot be within that same year or for another 6 months. So it's very restrictive in that sense. My objective is to stay in one place continually, not to travel. Traveling is something I've had to do, not a voluntary exercise. It's not something I set out to do. I set out to become free from suffering in this lifetime, and traveling is certainly not the way to do that. Traveling is chasing external phenomena, chasing external things, looking, seeking, searching. Now, as I was just saying, our teachers, our greatest lessons are to be learnt within ourselves through our practice of simply sitting and observing what is occurring naturally, staying a while and passing away, the impermanence of that, anicca, realizing that. This can all be understood through our own practice wherever we are. We don't have to travel. Now, originally I did, for purposes of understanding and learning and immersing myself in the practice, travel to Thailand and spent many years there, but also going back and forth from England to Thailand, and then for various reasons subsequently, visas, then the pandemic, and then this and that and the other, I've gone to various locations in Asia mainly, but ordaining in India means that is my base, and it was my intention to stay there, not to go anywhere else. It's a big enough country to be able to, well, you'd never get bored, but I mean, that wasn't the point. We have many branches that need bhikkhus resident in them, so the resources were there to support me. But unfortunately, the government in place or the immigration authorities there don't necessarily agree. And if you're British, there's a lot of prejudice against you. So, and Buddhists also. So if you're English Buddhist monk, immigration don't look kindly upon you when you enter. It's not like going to Thailand where I'm treated so well. In fact, arriving in India, I am treated actually quite appallingly. Last time I was locked in an office for 2 hours and then interrogated as to what my purpose for visiting was. And this should never be the case with anyone visiting any country whom is essentially visiting as a tourist. And whatever they look like, whatever their religion, really shouldn't matter, should it? Not in this day and age. But unfortunately, in India, which I consider my second home, I'm to some extent a little bit ostracized. So that's why I'm not going back there as often as I might, because it's not very easy to do so. But I'm very happy to be here, so I'm not complaining. I always thought it was forbidden to slice fruits or veggies on your own. Yes, that's right. We can't prepare food or cut food as monks. We don't cook. It's not so much forbidden. It's not a serious rule. There may be occasions when you have to, but it technically is outside of our Vinaya guidelines and rules. In the case of fruit, that is quite specific. There is a specific rule, and this is referring to the picture or video of there's 3 mangoes on my alms bowl pindapat lid, and you may not see in the picture or the video, there's a little knife there. And they are separate from the food in my bowl, which has all been prepared, offered, given to me, put in my bowl for me to eat. And that is how food is offered to monks and how we eat. Now, the reason the 3 mangoes aren't in the bowl, although the bananas and everything else are, is because those mangoes had not been cut up, sliced, as you quite rightly say, by a lay person ready for me to eat. But fruit doesn't actually have to be fully prepared. It's sufficient for it to just be cut once to be proven that it's ready for you to eat, as opposed to, say, fruit laying on the ground which could grow into a tree. The reason the Vinaya rule, this particular Vinaya rule, came about was monks could eat fruit that was laying on the ground because it really was not belonging to anybody else, for instance. And lay people were saying that that could well have grown into a tree, so they were disturbing that process. So the Buddha made a rule that all fruit has to be symbolically cut in order that it's been symbolically prepared and therefore not ready for planting but is ready to eat. So we even have a little ceremony for that. The reason those 3 mangoes are on my bowl lid with a little knife is because when Aruna comes to collect the food, I would ask him or any lay person to come. If the fruit hasn't already been cut in my presence, then someone has to come with that little knife and they just literally cut each piece of item of fruit. And in order for them to do that, I say Kapiam Korohi. They stab the fruit like this and say Kapiam Bhante, and offering it to me back, which is saying in the Pali language, I am asking that they make the fruit ready, and they are saying as they hand it back, it is ready, Bhante. And that is correct what you say, and that is why the 3 mangoes aren't in my bowl, they're on the lid, ready for someone to do that for me. Is it good for other people taking the monks extra food? I don't know, just asking. Yes, they're not taking it, it's being given. It's my way of offering dana back to people who need it, appreciate it, want it, require it, and are there to collect it and distribute it. So there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's quite essential because I'm offered considerably more than I'm possibly able to eat in one day, let alone in one mealtime, in one sitting. So it's a very good way of allowing many people to offer food to monks, and then also many people, other people, to benefit. So moving on to the next question, it's not the next question, but I remember seeing it earlier, that you noted that it wasn't the kilos of food that I've described. Well, the food in that video, that particular, the pictures and the video there. Oh, here comes the cat, which I haven't seen for a couple of days. I have some yogurt for you, so please come in. The food, the surplus there, wasn't including the water that I get offered, the drinks, and some of the big fruits like coconuts and big jackfruits and pineapples and all of that's what makes up the weight. So there is a lot to carry back, but I usually have the help of a tuk-tuk man to do that for me, or help me back with it. Now the other people also, any homeless people I see on my walk around, which is quite a long way, and I see about 3, 4, sometimes more different people who are literally living on the streets and begging. I usually give them a little parcel of food. I don't really investigate too much what's in there. As you see, most of the food that gets put in my bowl is wrapped up, but generally it's much the same. So I give them as you know, much as seems appropriate, and that's distributed that way. Now, is it good? Yeah, of course. You know, suffering, the worst kind of suffering we can have is hunger. The biggest illness in the world is starvation. And you're starving, you want some yogurt, don't you? I feel even much like interrupting this little talk, this video, to get you your yogurt, so you don't run off and not have anything. But we'll try and continue with the next question. I'll tell you what, we'll do that. I hope you don't mind. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to pause the video, if I know how to do that. I'll get this little, little fellow, young lady, old lady, whatever she is, some yogurt. So she's now having some yogurt. She's included in those others that get the monks food. So it's very good. Yeah, she's enjoying that. I haven't seen her for a couple of days, so glad to see her back. Okay. I was wondering if you can make a video about living with noise, sounds, vibration and discomfort, especially how to live with noise that puts you in discomfort of living life the way you want it, considering you got no control over sounds. Yes, well, I think I have spoken of this regularly, many occasions. Now, hearing sound, noises, I have them here, just making these videos. A little earlier, when I was talking, the dog next door was pushing his empty food bowl all around on the ground. So you might not have heard that, but it was kind of interfering with my concentration. But sounds, noises. The emphasis I must put in your comment, or note in your comment, is it puts you in discomfort of living life the way you want it. This is the problem. We don't want suffering, whether it be what we're seeing or what we're hearing, and hearing is very intrusive. We can close our eyes, but we can't close our ears. We can block them up, we can do all sorts of things, but really it's very difficult to obliterate, to really get rid of noise without replacing it with much louder noise. What one has to develop in the practice is the ability to find the seclusion from all you see, hear, smell, taste and touch and experience within yourself without having to switch it off or wishing it would go away, wanting it to change. This is identifying the cause of suffering. So at the beginning I was talking about the Four Noble Truths. There is suffering. Yes, there is noise. Know that. Even if you go into a very beautiful, quiet place, there will be sounds that will come in to be more noticeable in that quiet place than in a less quiet place. So say you found the perfect place to meditate, it's all peaceful, and then all of a sudden a buzzing hang glider flies over. You'll notice that more than if you were in a busy environment. Or like just then, I heard a tuk-tuk horn going. It's more noticeable here than if I was in the middle of the city. So our attention is drawn to it. But we have to just hear this as sound, our ears hearing sound, picking up the vibrations, and then we are interpreting it as something we either like or we dislike. We want or we don't want. We try and get away from it or we go to it. If it's a nice tune, some nice music, we might want to hear it a bit louder. If it's something of an annoying nature, we'll want it to go away. This is just desire. We recognize this desire of either wanting or not wanting, liking or disliking, as either positive or negative. Either way, it is desire, and this is the cause of suffering. Identifying that cause of suffering is how we eradicate suffering, knowing that it isn't the sound itself, it is the not wanting the sound that is causing the suffering. So if you hear a sound and you say, there is that sound, I'm hearing it again, it's just that. My ears hearing sound. And my not liking of sound is what is causing me the suffering. This full understanding is how we eradicate that suffering, because we'll also understand from that and from the ability to sit and practice meditation throughout all disturbances that are going on around us, that these things are impermanent. Now, the tuk-tuk horn isn't beeping now. The dog isn't howling or pushing its bowl around. The cat's enjoyed its yogurt and now gone to sit on the little chair outside, where it will now rest for hopefully a good part of the day. Everything's changing all of the time, but all conditioned things are impermanent as well as unsatisfactory, and it must always be remembered they are out of our control. Knowing this is how we deal. So you're asking me if I can make a video about living with noise, sounds, vibration, discomfort. Watch all of these videos. Each and every one of them is recorded in and surrounded by noise. You're specifically saying vibrations. I'm not sure quite what you mean by that. Maybe a little vibration if someone's got loud boom, 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 boom speakers. Here, if it's raining heavily, and you'll certainly have some videos coming to you soon that will be recorded during heavy rain because there won't be a choice. Hopefully you'll be able to hear what I'm saying, but it's quite loud to experience heavy rain in these kind of buildings with all of the trees around as well. And the thunder here is exceptionally, I'm sure it's loud everywhere, but it seems to be particularly loud here. So these kind of environmental challenges are what the practice is about. And we don't look for seclusion as in sensory deprivation in our practice, trying to find a way to switch off all seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, because even with that, we cannot switch off or mask thinking. So our sixth sense of thinking is going to always be there. And within our minds, even in the most silent situation, say you could literally turn off hearing, turn the sound off, you will be hearing the sounds of your mind. Some say the sound of silence, a tone, a notable noise, a notable note, sound, tone, vibration, continually going on, even in silence or relative silence. But there is the sounds of your body even, in terms of the blood pumping in your ears and your breathing, all of these sounds which will become very noticeable in the more quiet it becomes around you. But if you could even switch all of that off, you've got the sounds of your mind. You may be thinking of musical tunes, you may be thinking of something somebody has said, voices, or noises you've heard in the past, or you may be anticipating disruption. This is silent sound, as opposed to the sound of silence. That's silent sound. It's always there until such a time that you can develop such deep states of absorption into your meditation object that you are even becoming free from that disturbance, that distraction, and free from that suffering. So identifying the suffering, knowing it as impermanent, unsatisfactory, and out of your control, bringing your awareness back to the meditation object, the breath, is the way you deal with it. And just that, no more than that. Don't try to stop the sound, move away from it, accept it for what it is, and know that. And it will soon pass. If it doesn't, it will remain and you won't notice it. Much like a fridge or a air conditioning unit or something like this, which continually makes a noise that you don't notice until it switches off. The thermostat kicks in, it switches off. All of a sudden you notice the silence. It's noticeable by its absence. So I think that's... Do you stay in Sri Lanka mostly? I plan to now stay in Sri Lanka mostly, yes. Now, I don't have the problems with visas here that I was just referring to that I have in India. I mean, I have a 5-year visa for India, but I'm only allowed to stay there for 6 months in any 1 year, 180 days to be precise. I have a 5-year visa here for Sri Lanka, which is similar in that I stay here for 6 months, but if I then leave the country, and generally I have somewhere to visit, you know, every 6 months, so that's not a problem. But say I literally, as I've just done, I went to Thailand for a few days and then was able to return here. So that's not a problem. I can go somewhere, I can visit India, for instance, in 6 months' time for a few days or a few weeks even, return to Sri Lanka. That I can't do in India. I have to be away for a full 6 months. But here I can. So yes, that's not the only reason. The reason I hope to be able to stay here. I say hope to be able to stay here because I require the permission of my Sangha my fellow brethren and teachers back in India whom are responsible for me, and I am responsible to them. I require their permission to live, stay anywhere. So this is how bhikkhus live in the world, as dependent on their sangha and their teacher, as well as the lay people locally that support them. So with their permission, I would like to stay here for the foreseeable future, yes, because it's environmentally good. I've not spent a full monsoon season here yet. Hopefully I will spend the next Vasa here. Then I would have spent an entire year here in this same location, experienced all the different weather conditions. At the moment, we've been experiencing extreme heat, and more so than perhaps in previous years. So I'm probably seeing all of the extremes here, and I'm comfortable living that way. I'm well supported with accommodation, with food, and the other requisites. So happy and hoping to stay here, yes. Sorry, that's about vegetarianism and food. I'm sure I've covered that at least once recently. So, and this one is again about a subject I've covered recently. Oh, glad to see the cat still a pleasant companion. That's just a coincidence. Well, this cat disappeared for a few days and has just returned. So, but this isn't the same cat, this is a different cat. The cats here in Sri Lanka are feral. They just live anywhere within a 300-meter territory, zone, if you like. So I moved a bit further than that from the last place, so the cat stayed in its zone. And this is a cat in this zone, which lives a bit like a monk. It goes from house to house and gets fed. And hunts, of course, as well, which monks, of course, don't do. But yes, this is just a visiting cat, and as such is the ideal little companion for a monk, because it isn't at all needy. It doesn't need much attention, but it is a very nice companion to have around. With very little needs. If I can offer it something, then, as I just have, then I certainly do so. But it would survive if I disappeared tomorrow, because it doesn't rely on just one householder. It relies on many. They don't live in the house like a pet cat here. They live outside and visit many houses. So it's a very good example, apart from the whole hunting aspect but that's necessity and that's nature. So the more I feed the cat, the less it has to go out and kill. So I look at it that way. Oh, it's a lot about travelling. Have you ever been to Indonesia? No, I haven't. You're travelling there at the moment, and you're dreaming of becoming a Buddhist monk somewhere in the near future. Well, that's anumodana sadhu for that. Actually, Indonesia, I think they've got a lot of monasteries, a lot of temples, and I'm not sure exactly what their Buddhism's different in every country. Even what are so-called Theravada countries, it varies quite a lot. The teachings of the Buddha are the same everywhere, the core teachings, that is, that I mentioned at the beginning when we were talking about teachers. As long as you always remember that, all the rest of it doesn't matter so much. You go along with it, you enjoy it, you take part in it if necessary, but you stick to the Noble Eightfold Path and your practice. And you can find just as much of a place to practice there, I'm sure, in Indonesia as here or anywhere where Buddhism is going on. So, I wish you well with that and hope you enjoy the rest of your travels. Does continued meditation really help in renouncing desires and living a simple life? Well, yes. Now, I can just say yes, and you can choose to believe that or not. What you're saying is renunciation, giving up some of the things that we choose to have in our lives and find temporary pleasure, gratification and enjoyment in. Does giving those up assist with us in our meditation and reduce those desires? And I'm saying yes, but I am saying yes from a place of experience. So I had more or less whatever I wanted to have in lay life, but found that renunciation as opposed to acquisition was the path to contentment, was the way to experience contentment, satisfaction. Whereas getting, the opposite of renunciation, was only leading to more and more wanting, which ultimately just leads to more suffering. So by example, I can say that yes, it does. But it doesn't mean you have to become a monk or a nun, but just identify the little things you can stop doing that don't make much difference in your life at first, but allow you then to spend more time in meditation. How long does it take? Well, each and every one of us is very different, so one can't say specifically, but if you were to determine to do nothing else other than to practice meditation, mindfulness on 8 precepts, so live like a monk or a nun without distraction, but really the only way you can do that is in a retreat environment, and not even necessarily those, but with ordination, because we're always tempted in lay life, or even not as a result of our own inclination, other influences will come through the front door or through the windows to disturb our practice. But if we could completely avoid all of that, then it wouldn't take so very long at all. But it will take quite some time if we are having to then go to work each day and, earn the money to pay for all of the goods and gadgets that we need these days. When you start renouncing, you need less, you need to therefore work less to pay for those things, and you can spend more time on the practice. So essentially, how long does it take? However much you put in. You will reap what you sow. You will see the benefit, the results of what you and how you practice. How do you deal with the changes and urges in life? Well, this is seeing those changes as that, just changes. Everything, all conditioned things are impermanent, and the urges are just based on desires which are due to unsatisfactoriness. So the second of those 3 characteristics of existence, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, are what gives us the urges, the desires to either go towards something, get more of it, or to run away from something, have less of it. Recognizing, just knowing that is how you deal with them. It can eradicate those desires. So that's hopefully, essentially, in answer to all of your questions, practice the Noble Eightfold Path, Sila, Samadhi and Panya. Why so different from monks of Japan? Well, I'm not sure. I mean, the way we look, monks in Japan look different. In different countries, robes look different, and they're worn differently. It's not that important. The general idea is that material that robes are made from is second-hand old cloth, just stitched together in a certain pattern, and one would use the dyes in the local area to colour the robes, to preserve the robes, to give them some kind of antiseptic quality so they don't get smelly and mildewy. These natural dyes are going to be representative of, or the colours going to represent the geographical area. So I think if you go into Zen Buddhism in Japan, I think, I could be wrong, I may be thinking of Korean or Malaysian, they have they just have grey robes, or even black. Not black, because we're not supposed to wear black. It's one of the colours that's not advised by the Buddha, but grey or dark grey. This is because they use charcoal, which has antiseptic and cleaning and dyeing properties. We dye the robes because they're of no colour. They're all mixed colours and dirty, and they need to be thoroughly cleaned and boiled to a sort of white natural or natural base colour, and then dyed with a local product. And there they use charcoal, so they're grey. In terms of Thailand, we use the heartwood of the jackfruit tree, which is where this colour comes from. In India, they use some kind of, it used to be saffron, but now it's probably turmeric or something like that, so they're more yellowy and orange. Here, I'm not so sure. They tend to use a lot of synthetic materials and things here, and they're very bright in colour, but it's probably representative again of turmeric or saffron. And they also, like in Burma, have the burgundy robes, which would be, I would imagine, some berries of some kind like that they wear. So that's the look. In terms of the practice, well, the Zen Buddhism of Japan is not so far away from Theravada Buddhism, but what you see are all of those optional extras I was referring to earlier, the bells and whistles, the add-ons that come culturally with the locality. Geographical, cultural influences. As Buddhism moved out from India, it picked all of these up, and they vary. This is why every Buddhist monk looks and acts differently. In principle, their precepts are the same. Their practice is the same. All bhikkhus have 227 precepts, and all bhikkhus are practicing sila, samadhi, panya. That's all that matters. Sila, keeping moral virtue, keeping those precepts. Samadhi, practicing meditation. Panya, developing wisdom. What they do with the rest of their day, ceremonial, devotional practices, is largely irrelevant. The beauty of your monks and practice in Japan is, as I understand it in the Zen tradition, it is very much just meditation and sila. So it's very much akin and aligned with and the same as, well, my own practice, but Theravada Buddhist practice as far as the forest tradition is concerned in Thailand and other countries that have the forest tradition. It is very close to that, although it might look a little different. So I think I'm probably should be drawing this to a close now. That's a very long answer, even though it's not a long question. So somebody is asking me, I'll just read the whole thing. Thank you for all your help, Bhante. For now, I have a belief that God simply is a consciousness that creates. But I've heard you say that you don't believe in a God. To believe or not to believe makes no difference to me. However, this God question sticks with me, so I'm very interested in learning your thoughts on why there is no God. Thank you, Bhante. Okay, so I have never said there is no God, and I don't say that I don't, and if I said I don't believe in a God, it's because I don't believe in a singular God. There is in Buddhism, in fact, the realm of gods where there are many gods. And there are many realms, but this isn't a required belief of Buddhist practice, but an understanding and part of the teachings and something that is referred to in devotional practices as are devas, which are like the equivalent of angels, and gods, which are the equivalent of, well, which are gods, but not just one. I don't discount that or talk much about that. I don't, like you, have neither one view or another on that. I'm agnostic to some extent with regards to gods, because it is something we can't necessarily, we cannot have proven within this lifetime and see for ourselves, whereas experientially through the practice there are many aspects which can be considered as belief in Buddhism, like previous lives and rebirth, which can be experienced within this life through an understanding and through the practice. Whereas we're not necessarily going to speak to or meet a god or gods. So I leave what cannot be experienced aside to be found out later, and just concentrate on what can be experienced in all that I talk about. So in answer to your question, interest in learning your thoughts on why there is no God, I don't say there is no God, but I don't believe in a single creator God, a theistic religion that requires one to put one's hand on one's heart and say, I believe in the one and only God, which is the apostolic creed that every Christian has to say in church every time. I do not believe that. So I'm not saying there is no God, but I'm not saying I'm not able to swear an oath that I do believe that. I, like you, think neither one way or the other on that subject. It isn't relevant to the Noble Eightfold Path. So that's my views on God, gods, and all of these subjects relating to that. So I think for now that is... Yes, just quickly add this. It says in the description, I was educated by French monks. Do you speak and write in French? No, I don't. We did learn a little French at school, but just school French, you know. I don't speak it. And I spent time as a young person in France with family and things. But the monks, although they were French monks, they were of a French order. They weren't necessarily French. In fact, some of them were up north in my country. Most of them were English, Scottish, Welsh, Northerners, Southerners, but I think don't think we had any French monks. They were all of a French order. So the De Lamennais brothers. But in Catholicism, the religious language is Latin. So, you know, they speak the liturgy in Latin. As in Buddhism, it is Pali. So the scriptures, the Pali canon, are in Pali. And we use Pali words as the Catholics use Latin words to describe certain fundamental aspects of these religions and these faiths. So therefore they're international, because Catholicism, of course, throughout the world is using Latin, as Buddhism throughout the world is using Pali. The local language isn't so important, but it is, of course, important in learning the basics of the Dharma from your teacher, that you are, unless you're very fluent in a language, learning from one who speaks your mother tongue. And I'm happy to see you found a Pali-French dictionary, which is useful. I know there are Pali dictionaries in most languages these days, which is great. That's good to know. So on that note, I think I should leave it there. I hope there's something useful in what we've talked about today, and you can use it and share it. If not, just let it go and don't let it bother you. Thank you for watching. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.